Morning guys, well, I'm just finishing up my last cup of coffee and I'm going to get ready to bottle my kombucha. I just thought I'd take you along and show you how I make it and give you the steps and ingredients you're going to need if you want to make your own. So kombucha is really quite simple. It's just fermented tea. Most people use black tea. You can start mixing other teas in, but it seems like the general consensus is to use black tea until your scobie is well developed, and then you can start mixing in green teas and that sort of thing. You really don't want to use anything that has chemicals in it or flavorings. You want to keep everything as natural as possible because your scobie is a living organism. It's a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, I think is what it stands for. So you want to treat it like a living organism. You don't want it to get too hot. You don't want it to get too cold. You don't want to dump weird things in it. But it is pretty durable. Generally, you don't want it to get over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So you want to keep it in that mid 70s to low 80s. Seems to be the sweet spot. And kombucha is basically fermented tea. You make your tea strong, you add some sugar, you add your SCOBie, you let it ferment, and you have it. It's just that easy. It takes a couple weeks to make, depending on your temperature, and another day or two for your bottles to fizz up if you want it fizzy, and you're off to drinking it. So let's go through the steps of making it as well as the ingredients as we go, and we'll get to making some. So what you're going to need is 6 to 8 tea bags, black tea. It can be organic, it can be cheap tea, it's up to you. And you want 1 cup of sugar. You can use cane sugar or white sugar. You kind of want to avoid honey as it has an antibacterial component to it. You want to stay away from brown sugars and molasses. But cane sugar, organic sugar, that sort of stuff is probably your best option, as well as just your plain white table sugar. You're going to need some sort of bottles when it comes time to bottle. Flip tops are your best option. They're pressure rated. They can handle being fermented in to do when you do your second fermentation, once you add your flavoring to get it fizzy. They're really durable. You kind of want to avoid mason jars. They're not pressure rated, and if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, the bottoms can pop out of them. I don't use them. You can get flip tops at most of your home brewing places. You can also order them on Amazon, which is where I've been getting them. I'll leave a link down below. You can also sometimes go to your beer stores and ask them if they have any flip top empties. Sometimes they will give them to you, sometimes they might charge you a little bit for them, but you know, it's really worth asking. All they can say is no. You're going to need a fermenting vessel. Usually a 1 gallon glass jar works, or a large pickle jar would work. The big ones that you get the pickled eggs and stuff in, or the sauerkraut. A 1 gallon size is the best. You can also get those on Amazon, Walmart. I'll leave a link for the kit that I bought. It's basically got everything you need to get going. You're going to want some sort of cloth to put over the top of the jar. It can be a coffee filter, it could be a dishcloth, it could be an old shirt. Just about anything that's going to allow the air to come out but keep the bugs from going in. So that pretty much covers all your equipment you're going to need, as well as the ingredients to get started. So the first thing you want to do is boil 4 cups or so of water, bring it to a boil, and then add your 6 to 8 tea bags. I recommend keeping a bit of a journal on what you use as far as ingredients goes, so that if you like it, you can recreate your recipe, and if you don't like it, you can tweak it or just throw it out altogether. Different teas have different flavors. Maybe you find 8 tea bags too strong, so you go down to 6, or maybe instead of letting it steep for 10 minutes, you let it steep for 5 minutes. So once your water comes up to a boil, add your 8 tea bags and your cup of sugar. Mix it all up so that the sugar dissolves really well, and let it sit on the stove off the heat but staying warm for 10-15 minutes or so. And at the end of that, you're going to have a really dark tea. You can pour it into your fermenting jar, your 1 gallon pickle jar, or whatever kind of jar you have. You can pour it in there and then top it up so it's about 3 or 4 inches from the top. You need room to add your SCOBie and the starting liquid. So once your tea mixture is added to your jar, top it up with water to a few inches from the top, and then check the temperature. You don't want it to be above 90. I shoot for around 80, maybe 75 to 80, and then you can add your SCOBie. I purchased my SCOBie online on Amazon. I'll leave a link for it as well, but you can buy one from different places around. You might even be able to find something in town if you live in a major city. If you know someone who makes kombucha at home, you can probably ask them for a piece of theirs, and you can do it that way. Once you have it, you can share it. You can cut off pieces and give it away, or do extra batches. I've heard of people even buying kombucha and the unflavored stuff and using that as their starter, and just dumping that into the batch. The more starter and bigger SCOBie you have, the quicker it ferments. So when you're starting out, things might take 2 or 3 weeks, and then as your SCOBie and stuff gets stronger, it might take a week and a half to maybe even a week. So once the temperature is down in the 75 to 80 range, you can add your SCOBie in the starter fluid, and just make sure that you still have about an inch and a half of headspace at the top of it, between it and the top of the jar, just for room for it to breathe and maybe expand if it needs to expand. You want to put your cloth on the top of it to help seal out the bugs and let it breathe. I like to use a rubber band around the top to hold the cloth in place. It's pretty easy, and it's easy for you to take it off and on. So once your jar has its cloth lid on it, you can put it away somewhere dark and out of direct sunlight for a week. Just leave it be. You can keep looking at it if you want, but just let it go. And after a week to a week and a half, you can start sampling it. Kombucha is done when it starts to get sour, but there will become a point where it starts to turn to vinegar. And depending on how much you like bitter and sour stuff, determines how far you take it. I like mine not sweet anymore, but I don't like it really bitter and sour. So what I do is after about a week to 10 days, I start sampling it, and as soon as it hits that point where I like it, I start the second fermentation. So after you sample it and you find that your kombucha is where you want it to be as far as the bitterness or the sourness goes, it's time to start bottling. There's a lot of different ways of flavoring it, different things you can flavor it with, from fruits to herbs. This last batch I did was a mixed berry and ginger. This time I'm going to use peaches and try that out. But basically what I do is I'll take a cup and a half of fruit, a couple spoonfuls of sugar. I'll bring it up to a warm temperature, maybe even just about a boil. I'll break everything down with a potato masher so everything's mushy. You could use a blender or a food processor, or maybe even an immersion blender, and puree it up real well so that it's able to get into the liquid, and the liquid can absorb it and pull the flavors out. And then you want to bottle it. You want to bottle it up to about an inch from the top of your bottles with your new flavoring. And you want to put your cap on. Make sure that there's nothing around the top of your bottle, and you want to make sure that this gasket's nice and clean so that when you seal it up, it has a really good seal. You don't want any of the gases escaping in this fermentation. When it's sealed up, that's what causes the CO2 to go back into the solution, causing fizz. If you don't want fizz, then what you can do is once you flavor it and bottle it, throw your bottles into the fridge, and that'll stop any fermentation because the yeast and the bacteria slow down when it gets cold. So once you have your flavored kombucha bottled, you can place your bottles in a dark cupboard for up to 3 days, and then they're going to be really good and fizzy, and you're going to want to stick them in the fridge. The fridge helps stop or slow down the fermentation process, and it gives you time to be able to drink it where it hasn't reached the point of vinegar just yet. I like to have my kombucha over ice. I find it's got a nice tang to it. It's really good on a nice hot day, sitting out in the sun. I know some people mix it with some rum. I haven't tried that yet, but I'm sure it would be pretty tasty. Kombucha has a lot of health benefits. It's really good for your gut and digestive tract. I'll let you research all that good stuff because I'm definitely not a doctor. It's worth trying. There's tons of different flavors you can use, and it's pretty simple to make. I encourage you to give it a try, and if you do, or you have made it in the past, leave a comment down below with your flavor recipes. I'd like to try some out. So cheers guys, I hope you enjoy the video. Please subscribe and share, and I'm also on Instagram, so feel free to check me out on Instagram at Adam Craig Outdoors. We'll see you.